There comes a moment in every Hollywood legend's life when the spotlight begins to fade. The roaring applause grows quieter, the cameras disappear, and the glamorous headlines that once filled newspapers become little more than memories. What remains are the moments that truly mattered, the people who shaped a life. For Tony Curtis, those memories stretched across more than 6 remarkable decades. He was one of Hollywood's most charismatic leading men, admired for his unforgettable smile, effortless charm, and magnetic presence on screen. From timeless classics like Some Like It Hot and The Defiant Ones to countless other memorable performances, Tony became one of the defining faces of Hollywood's golden age. But away from the cameras, his personal life fascinated the public just as much as his films. Tony Curtis married 6 times and was linked to some of the most beautiful and celebrated women in entertainment. Every romance made headlines, leading many to believe he spent his life searching for something that always seemed just beyond his reach. Yet the truth was far more complicated. As the years passed, Tony became increasingly honest about his life. Through interviews, public appearances, and his memoirs, he reflected on the women who had changed him. Some relationships brought excitement, others brought heartbreak, while a few left lessons that stayed with him forever. Rather than speaking with regret, Tony often looked back with gratitude. He had lived through one of Hollywood's most extraordinary eras and shared his journey with remarkable women whose names still echo throughout film history. Among them were glamorous movie stars, rising actresses, devoted wives, and lifelong companions. Each represented a different chapter of his life, from the ambitious young actor, chasing his dreams, to the aging legend searching for peace. But when Tony Curtis reflected on the woman who had truly shaped his life, his answer wasn't simply about beauty, fame, or passion. It was about family. It was about shared dreams. It was about memories that never faded. Even after love itself had changed, before we discover the woman Tony believed left the deepest mark on his heart, we must first revisit the unforgettable women who helped define the extraordinary journey of one of Hollywood's greatest stars. The first was a woman whose name became one of the most recognizable in entertainment history. Marilyn Monroe. When audiences think of Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe together, one image immediately comes to mind: the unforgettable black and white scenes from Some Like It Hot. Released in 1959, the film became one of the greatest comedies ever made, and their on-screen chemistry was so convincing that many people believed it reflected a real-life romance. For decades, Hollywood gossip blurred the line between fiction and reality. The truth, however, was far more complicated. Long before either of them became international superstars, Tony and Marilyn were simply 2 young contract players trying to survive inside Hollywood's demanding studio system. They crossed paths at auditions, studio lots, and industry parties, each hoping for the breakthrough that would change their lives forever. Neither could have imagined they would one day share the screen in a film that would become one of cinema's greatest classics. By the time production began on Some Like It Hot, Marilyn Monroe had become one of the most famous women in the world, but behind the dazzling smile was a woman carrying enormous emotional pressure. Tony later recalled seeing her struggle with anxiety, self-doubt, and the overwhelming expectations placed upon her. Delays on set and constant media attention often made filming difficult, yet he never doubted the extraordinary talent she possessed. Although one of his humorous remarks about working with Marilyn became famous over the years, Tony later explained that the media focused on the joke while ignoring the respect he truly had for her. He believed very few performers possessed the unique ability Marilyn had to captivate an audience with nothing more than a smile or a single glance. Their relationship never became a lasting romance. Instead, it became a powerful reminder that even Hollywood's brightest stars often carried their greatest struggles in silence. By the early 1960s, Tony Curtis was no longer the ambitious young actor struggling to make his name in Hollywood. He had become an international superstar whose name alone could fill movie theaters around the world. Yet while his professional career was soaring, his personal life had become increasingly complicated. His marriage to Janet Leigh had come to an end, leaving behind emotional wounds that fame and success could not heal. Although he continued smiling for photographers and appearing at glamorous premieres, those closest to him knew he was searching for a fresh start. That opportunity seemed to arrive when he met the beautiful young German actress, Christine Kaufmann. The two first crossed paths while filming Terra's Bulba in 1962. Christine was already well known throughout Europe for her beauty and remarkable talent despite being much younger than Tony. Their connection developed quickly, and before long, Hollywood magazines were calling them one of the industry's newest fairy tale couples. Their age difference became a favorite topic for gossip columnists, but Tony paid little attention to the criticism. After the heartbreak of his first marriage, he believed he had finally found someone who brought hope and happiness back into his life. The couple married in 1963 and soon welcomed daughters together. For a while, life seemed exactly as Tony had imagined. They attended premieres, enjoyed family vacations, and tried to balance the demands of Hollywood with raising a young family. Friends often remembered them as affectionate and genuinely devoted to one another. But behind the smiles, the pressures of fame were quietly growing. Tony's career required constant travel, long months away on film sets, and endless promotional tour across the world. Christine, meanwhile, was determined to build her own successful acting career instead of simply being known as Tony Curtis's wife. As time passed, their different ambitions slowly began pulling them in opposite directions. Years later, Tony spoke candidly about that period of his life. Looking back, he admitted he may have entered the marriage before fully recovering from the heartbreak of losing Janet Leigh. Christine had given him hope during one of the most difficult chapters of his life. But hope alone could not erase unresolved pain. He eventually realized that no relationship could repair wounds, that only time and personal growth could heal. After 5 years together, Tony and Christine divorced in 1968. Unlike many celebrity separations, theirs avoided public scandal and bitter accusations. Instead, they chose to focus on co-parenting their daughters with dignity and respect. Christine continued enjoying a successful acting career in Europe, while Tony moved forward into yet another chapter of his extraordinary and often unpredictable life. Although their marriage did not last, Tony never dismissed its importance. Instead, he remembered Christine Kaufmann as the woman who gave him the courage to believe in love again after heartbreak. She reminded him that sometimes two good people meet at the wrong moment in life. They may care deeply for one another, yet still find themselves traveling in different directions. It was another lesson Tony Curtis would carry with him for the rest of his life. After decades of blockbuster films, glamorous premieres, failed marriages, and constant media attention, Tony Curtis reached a point where he was no longer chasing excitement. The man who had once been one of Hollywood's most sought-after leading men began to value something far quieter. Peace. Fame had brought him worldwide recognition, fortune, and unforgettable experiences, but it had also brought heartbreak, broken relationships, and years of emotional uncertainty. When Vandenberg entered his life in the early 1990s, Tony was no longer looking for the kind of romance that filled newspaper headlines. Instead, he was searching for companionship, stability, and someone who appreciated the man behind the legendary Hollywood image. Jill was considerably younger than Tony, and their relationship immediately attracted attention from the media. Critics questioned whether their romance could possibly last, assuming it would become just another brief celebrity relationship. They couldn't have been more wrong. Rather than living in the spotlight, Tony and Jill built a life centered on the simple things that had become increasingly important to him. He spent more time painting, one of the greatest passions of his later years. He devoted himself to charitable causes, enjoyed quiet evenings at home, and embraced a slower pace of life far removed from the constant demands of Hollywood. Jill supported every part of that new chapter. She encouraged his artwork, helped organize exhibitions of his paintings, and worked alongside him to establish charitable programs dedicated to helping children and preserving the arts. Friends often described Jill as patient, calm, and deeply devoted. She wasn't trying to change Tony Curtis. She simply accepted him for who he had become. As the years passed, Tony faced increasingly serious health problems. He underwent heart surgery, battled respiratory illnesses, and gradually found everyday life becoming more physically challenging. The energetic actor, who had once captivated audiences around the world, now depended heavily on those closest to him. Throughout those difficult years, Jill rarely left his side. She accompanied him to medical appointments, managed many aspects of his daily care, and provided the stability he had searched for during much of his life. Long before Tony Curtis entered the quieter years of his life, there was a relationship that rarely received as much attention as his marriages, but remained one of his fondest memories. It involved one of Hollywood's brightest young stars. Natalie Wood. Their romance never became the sweeping love story that magazines hoped for. It did not lead to marriage, nor did it become a lifelong partnership. Yet for Tony, it represented a special chapter that captured the excitement, hope, and endless possibilities of youth. During the 1950s, both Tony Curtis and Natalie Wood were among Hollywood's fastest-rising stars. Tony had already established himself as one of the industry's most charismatic leading men, while Natalie was making the remarkable transition from gifted child actress to one of Hollywood's finest dramatic performers. Their paths crossed frequently. They attended the same premieres, moved within the same social circles, and often found themselves surrounded by the glamour of Hollywood's golden age. Before long, a quiet romance began to blossom. Unlike many celebrity relationships fueled by publicity, Tony and Natalie enjoyed spending time together away from cameras and gossip columns. Friends remembered them laughing together, sharing long conversations, and appreciating the rare opportunity to be around someone who truly understood the pressures of fame. Both had grown up beneath Hollywood's spotlight. Both knew what it felt like to have every smile photographed and every private moment transformed into public conversation. In one another, they found comfort and understanding. But Hollywood has always demanded sacrifice. As Tony's career continued reaching new heights, his filming schedule became increasingly demanding. Natalie, meanwhile, was accepting one major role after another, determined to prove herself as one of the greatest actresses of her generation. Their professional lives slowly pulled them apart. Long months on different film sets and constant travel left little opportunity for their relationship to grow into something lasting. Rather than ending with dramatic arguments or public accusations, their romance quietly faded. There were no bitter interviews. No scandalous headlines. No attempts to rewrite history. Instead, they simply moved forward with their lives while carrying a deep respect for one another. Years later, Tony always spoke warmly whenever Natalie Wood's name was mentioned. He admired not only her extraordinary beauty but also her remarkable talent. He believed she possessed a rare ability to portray both strength and vulnerability in the same performance, something very few actors could accomplish. Watching her career flourish only confirmed what he had always believed. She was one of the finest actresses of her generation. Then tragedy struck. In 1981, Natalie Wood's unexpected death shocked Hollywood and devastated everyone who had known her. For Tony, it became another painful reminder that life can change without warning. He reflected on the many talented friends he had lost over the years, and the countless conversations that would never happen again. Natalie remained one of those memories he treasured not with regret, but with gratitude. Their relationship had never lasted long enough to become the defining love story of either of their lives. Perhaps that was exactly why it remained so beautiful. Some memories never have the chance to fade into disappointment. They remain forever connected to youth, possibility, and dreams that time could never erase. Yet as Tony Curtis looked back across the extraordinary journey of his life, there was still one woman whose influence reached further than romance itself. She had stood beside him during the most important years of his career. She had helped build the family that became his greatest legacy, and even after they went their separate ways, she remained forever connected to the chapter of his life he cherished most. That woman was Janet Leigh. If there was one woman whose name became forever intertwined with the story of Tony Curtis, it was Janet Leigh. Long before they were celebrated as one of Hollywood's most glamorous couples, they were simply two young actors chasing the same dream. They first met in the late 1940s while both were under contract with Universal Pictures, away from movie sets and flashing cameras. Their relationship grew naturally through shared ambition, mutual respect, and genuine affection. Unlike many romances created for publicity during Hollywood's golden age, theirs was real. In 1951, Tony and Janet married, quickly becoming one of the entertainment industry's most admired couples. Wherever they went, photographers followed, magazine covers celebrated their beauty, elegance, and success, while fans saw them as proof that true love could exist, even in the demanding world of show business. But behind every glamorous photograph was a real marriage filled with the same challenges faced by countless couples. As Tony's career soared with unforgettable films like The Defiant Ones, Sweet Smell of Success, and Some Like It Hot, Janet was building an extraordinary career of her own. Years later, she would become immortalized through her unforgettable performance in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Both were constantly traveling. Both were working long hours. Both carried enormous professional responsibilities. Finding time for ordinary family life became increasingly difficult. Yet together they built something that meant far more to Tony than fame or box office success. They became parents. Their daughters, Kelly Curtis and Jamie Lee Curtis, became the greatest source of pride in Tony's life. He often spoke about how much fatherhood meant to him, and despite the many complicated chapters that followed, he never stopped recognizing Janet as the woman who had given him one of life's greatest blessings, a family. Jamie Lee Curtis would eventually become one of Hollywood's most respected actresses herself, continuing the remarkable legacy her parents had created. But success came with a price. As the years passed, the pressures of fame slowly began taking their toll. Tony later admitted that he had not always been the husband Janet deserved. The constant attention, endless temptations, and relentless pace of Hollywood gradually created distance between them. By 1962, after more than a decade together, their marriage came to an end. For many celebrity couples, divorce marks the beginning of resentment. For Tony and Janet, it became something different. Although they built separate lives, the respect between them never completely disappeared. As Tony grew older, he spoke about Janet not with bitterness, but with gratitude. He remembered the young woman who believed in him before the world knew his name, the partner who stood beside him while they built a family, the mother of his children, and the woman who shared what he would later describe as some of the happiest years of his life. When Janet Leigh passed away in 2004, Tony's reflections became even more heartfelt. He chose not to dwell on the mistakes that had ended their marriage. Instead, he remembered the laughter they shared, the dreams they built together, and the life they created long before Hollywood fame complicated everything. Over time, Tony came to understand something that many people never do. Love is not always measured by how long it lasts. Sometimes it is measured by the lives the people build together. By the children they raise. By the memories that remain decades after they have gone their separate ways. Throughout his remarkable life, Tony Curtis experienced passion, admiration, excitement, heartbreak, and companionship. Marilyn Monroe showed him the hidden cost of fame. Christine Kaufmann represented hope after heartbreak. Jill Vandenberg gave him peace during his final years. Natalie would remain a treasured memory of youthful dreams, but Janet Leigh held a place that no one else could truly replace. She was the woman who witnessed his rise from an ambitious young actor to one of Hollywood's greatest stars. She shared his greatest triumphs. She gave him the family that remained at the center of his life, and even after their marriage ended, she never truly left his heart. As Tony Curtis looked back across more than 8 decades of life, he seemed to realize that while many people may enter our hearts, only a few become part of who we are forever. For millions of movie lovers, Tony Curtis will always be remembered as one of Hollywood's most charismatic leading men, but beyond the fame, the awards, and the unforgettable films lies a far more personal story, a story about love, about family, about second chances, and about the quiet realization that the love which shapes a lifetime is not always the one that lasts forever. Sometimes it is simply the one that never truly leaves.